by people inside Kellogg, Brown, and Root, and we've confirmed these documents are real, that they are now actually getting the subcontractors to where on 72 hours notice, they can man civil unrest camps, and they're going to put people in sports stadiums first, like we've seen some of the Occupy Wall Street in Los Angeles taken to the Dodger Stadium, and that they will then be taken to these centers. And perhaps I should email you those documents, but they're on INFOWARS.com and have been confirmed. But, I mean, overall, we're seeing a lot of movement here. I've also seen some newscasts where they've said, let's just put all the Muslims in camps if there's another attack. Why do you think all this movement is taking place right now?
Well, I think some of the same kinds of hysteria exist today. Back in 1941-42, they rounded up dangerous people like Buddhist priests and Japanese language teachers as dangerous people and put them in federal prison camps, actually prisons, and families knew not where they were sent, and there was no due process. And this is the issue. The issue is that anybody who is on the soil of this great country should be allowed due process guaranteed by the Constitution. And we are now moving back to the Dark Ages, where there are those that feel that we have the right today to eliminate that due process, to forego that due process, forego the Constitution in order to satisfy the whims of those in the military.
Are you aware of, I mean, it was in the Houston Chronicle and Wall Street Journal in 2006 that KBR, Kellogg, Brown, and Root for Halliburton, was given the $380+ million contract to build camps for 3 million people. That came out then, but now we have the documents. We're putting them on screen while you're talking, sir, where they're saying that, again, they're preparing the actual contractors to run the barricades, the barbed wire, the jail guards, the resettlement specialist is what they're calling them. I mean, this is pretty chilling news, and it hadn't gotten any attention. I do intend to send it to you, hopefully, because your group is able to get media attention. You can investigate it.
Yeah, if this were the case, I have no information to that regard, but if this were the case, it would be terrible. Again, the government actually apologized for what they did to Japanese Americans, and they recognized that it was a mistake, that there was hysteria, and there was no political leadership at that time that caused that to happen. And reparations, redress was given to Japanese Americans with the passage of an act of Congress in 1988, and a letter was given to each person that was incarcerated apologizing for what was done. So that was done in order that we learn a lesson. And how unfortunate it is that we see that some have not learned that lesson and have forgotten history already and the mistake that was made back then.
Now, you're a former state legislator and mayor, so you know how to read these documents, but Ron Paul came out, the ACLU came out, other Democrats came out and said, we've read this, it affects citizens, this NDAA. Then the media said, no, it doesn't. But then John McCain, Senator Graham, and others came out and said, no, it does affect citizens. The whole world's a battlefield, and we'll arrest citizens for no reason if we want. And Obama went further and said, we'll kill citizens like a Lockie if we want. But he says he's going to veto the bill because the executive already has this power. I mean, when you saw all that transpire, I know you put a letter out saying it was dangerous, but I mean, personally, what's your view on this? Were you shocked by how brazen this was?
Yes, I am shocked, particularly by those that are in authority and ought to know better, and supposedly are operating under the Constitution of this great country. And so, yeah, it's a shock to us as a community. It should be a shock to everybody in this country. And I think citizens ought to be speaking very loudly to their senators and to their congressmen. The bill is now on the House side, and I think similar provisions, even stronger provisions, are in that bill. And so we are urging, I just sent a letter out to the House of Representatives to, again, oppose those provisions in this defense authorization bill.
Amazing. Going back in time, because I, years ago read a book about it and seen some newscasts, but correct me if I'm wrong, didn't, a lot of the hardworking and smart Japanese on the West Coast owned companies, huge farms, shipping outfits, fishing outfits, warehouses, and didn't a lot of the property basically get confiscated while Japanese Americans were locked up in camps?
Yes, they had no means to earn money, and so a lot was foreclosed. People lost their homes, their businesses. My wife's father was one of those who lost everything, and not only lost the economic elements, but I think he lost a lot of self-respect because of what the government did, and never really recovered from that incident until the day he passed away. Wow,
that's terrible. There are German towns all around Texas. Some of my family, is German on my mom's side, and, lived in those towns since the 1830s and 40s. They didn't get rounded up, though, even though they were German-speaking during World War II. Was it because Japanese had brown skin?
Well, I think, Japanese had a different culture. Many had a different religion. Does it sound familiar as today? And many had a different color of skin. And so they were easy to identify, and so they were rounded up. Interestingly, there were other Asian Americans in the country at that time, and they were not a threat, just Japanese Americans.
Incredible. I was going to ask you where you're going from here, but you've written a letter, a new letter to the Congress. What did you say to them in that letter? And can folks go to the JACL.org, Japanese American Citizens League website, and read that?
Yes, it will be up on the website by the end of this week. But basically the same letters we sent to the Senate, that it's a dangerous precedent, that it's contrary to our Constitution, and that we should eliminate that from the bill. Okay,
now I'm going to email you, and I should have done this before the interview, but I asked the guys to get you a couple days ago, and they got you pretty quickly, so I think that's why I forgot to tell them to send you all the new information that just broke 2 days ago, because it's happened so quick. But and we've been putting it on screen while you've been talking, so the viewers have now seen it. But after I send you this FEMA camp information, with all the accompanying documents, and if it turns out to be true what I've told you about, not only have they built the camps, which has been admitted in the last decade, now they're preparing to man them. What do you plan to do if indeed this is true?
Well, if this is actually true, certainly we'll look into it, and if this is actually true, we will do whatever we can with colleagues that we have here and coalitions that we have here to oppose and to make sure it doesn't happen.
It seems like anytime we're in a depression, too, which we're going into, we were in one at the beginning of World War II, it's just a nice thing politically to demonize groups as well. It's their fault. And it's just scary how history repeats itself.
It is kind of scary, and you go back to the World War II years, and all these Japanese Americans were rounded up, but in the end, there was never one conviction of a Japanese American for espionage or sabotage or any war crime whatsoever. So all these innocent people, without any due process, were rounded up. Lives were taken away, and as we've discussed, economic means were destroyed and taken away.
Wow.
All in the name of national security, and it didn't do any good to national security.
Amazing. Last question. Floyd Mori is our guest. He's the head of the Japanese American Citizens League. His website's been up on the screen, but it's jacl.org for the visually impaired out there, jacl.org. Reading a book about this or interviewing a few other Japanese American victims of this who I have over the years, still there's so many stories, so many things that happened, but what I find particularly horrifying is the way people were picked up. Heading up a group, that obviously hearing the stories, talking to people, your wife's family, can you describe for us how the roundups happened and then abuses that may have happened inside these facilities?
Well, they were given 2 weeks' notice to take care of their personal business, and they were to take whatever they could carry, and they were put into, in some cases, trucks and taken to assembly centers. And when they were actually taken to the camps, they were put in trains that had shields so people could not look in to see who it was, and then unloaded and taken to these camps. Within the camps, they did the best they could, but being confined, there were issues that occurred there. Not brutality from the Army. I think as the time went by, the military began to understand that these people were not a threat and began to treat them a lot more humanely. And so, but there were, disagreements. Why are we here? As you know, many volunteered for the Army out of these camps to go fight the war in Europe, and also many volunteered to the military intelligence service to help the troops in the Pacific. And I think it was Colin Powell who I heard quoted saying that the Japanese-American military intelligence service probably saved 1 million lives and shortened the war by a year because of the work that they did in intelligence in the Pacific. So out of these camps, they showed patriotism, and I think because of what they did, and as you know, just last month, we celebrated here in Washington, D.C., the presentation of the Congressional Gold Medal of Honor to these Japanese-American veterans of World War II.
Wow. Well, Floyd Mori, thank you so much for joining us. It just makes me think, though, that even though the Army knew within just a few months that this was all just a hysteria, they still, though, kept everybody in there, even though their sons were being sent off and volunteering for some of the most dangerous duty in Europe. And then they still just kept them there till the end of the war because the government didn't want to admit that they'd done something wrong. Hopefully we can turn this new hysteria around before it goes too far. But I really do appreciate you joining us today, and I hope to speak to you in the next few weeks after you've seen these documents.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
Thank you very much, sir. All right. Well, man, I tell you, these are times that are really, really creepy and scary, and that's it for InfoWars Nightly News. I'm going to send him the Halliburton and Brown and Root documents, and hopefully their organization can get more attention on this than I can. There's been a media blackout since we got this information, but back in 2006 when we got the documents on Halliburton and KBR, it did spur some national attention, and hopefully that will happen here this time. Until tomorrow night, I wish you all well, but please spread the word about all the news that we've been covering. And also remember, we have 44% off right now on a yearly membership at PrisonPlanet.tv if you're watching this out there on the web and believe in this type of information getting out to the public. And we will also air this interview tomorrow on the syndicated radio broadcast. God bless you all.